welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica from Syosset Public Library. I will be your host today for Turn the Page podcast. And I'm here to talk to an author who wrote a book that has been haunting me since I turned that last page and closed it. I do not think I will ever forget this book, and it left me with so many questions and room for research of my own. Welcome. Please tell us who you are and about this book.
Hi, Jessica. Well, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Rushby, or otherwise known as Alison Rushby. I am the author of more than 30 books. I had my start in adult fiction. I spent a long time in children's fiction after that. And now I am coming back to adult fiction again with a work of historical fantasy called Slashed Beauties.
It's historical fantasy, but I mean, dare I call it historical horror as well?
Yes, I think so. But it's not as horror-ish as many horror books out there, but it definitely has horror elements, yes.
I mean, it's, and like that's the thing, like horror is very nuanced, It's not all just people running around with knives killing people, although there's some of that.
They actually do. Yeah.
Actually. So first of all, this is a book told in two timelines.
Yes.
And it is the story of women who were sex workers, but it's also it's a story about internalized misogyny, how women are kind of pitted against each other, but it's also the story of this really bizarre phenomenon of these wax sculptures that were supposed to be used for medical, people going into the medical field.
Anatomy, yep.
Yeah, but if you look them up and you look up what they looked like, you're like, oh, that is a woman who is cut up, who is mid encounter.
Yes.
Yes.
There's a lot of the male gaze in there, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. so much. I mean, there's the one that I looked up, the one that I think most people are familiar with. I mean, she is clearly, aside from the fact that she has these dead glass eyes, in the throes of passion. And it's so bizarre. In general, of course, you hear a lot about grave robbery and resurrectionists and the ways that people had to go about securing bodies so medical students could, study it. But it is really bizarre. There's artistry in it, and it's disturbing. And so please tell us a little bit about this book in your own words and where the idea for the story came from.
Sure. So as you were saying, Slashed Beauties is a dual narrative. So we've got those two timelines going on. It's about three women in 18th century London whose lives become magically and murderously intertwined when they meet an anatomist and a witch with a wicked plan. And then we've got a young antiques dealer in present-day London who she has to find a way to break her cursed connection to that trio of women. So the anatomical Venuses that are shown in Slashed Beauties, they're difficult to get across. You really have to see one, don't you? So they were these hyper-realistic wax models of women, and they were made from about the 1780s first in Italy, and they were made for anatomical study. And this is because cadavers were in short supply and they decomposed quickly, so this was an easy way to study the female form, I suppose. They're life size. They have this beautiful, long, generally golden hair, like real eyelashes. They have this sort of dewy waxen skin and this erotic, sort of ecstatic expression. Often they'll be wearing pearls which just as a woman just feels so bizarre when you see why on earth are they wearing pearls? They're made like that way to capture the male attention and to hold the male attention because why else would you study the female form? And
Yeah, for real. It's,
yeah,
it's like it's not like yeah.
they're just so bizarre, aren't they, when you see them? Because we could never mix. For us, it's just abhorrent to mix um, art and medicine and religion all in this one package. To the modern eye, it's really deeply in the uncanny valley. And I'll tell you the story of how, I came about them. I was in a museum in Vienna. I'd never seen one before. And I walked into this room and she was in a glass case, like a glass coffin, really. And she just absolutely stopped me in my tracks, that sort of violent mix of science and art. And I just sort of stood with her for a long time. And I think novelists do tend to go to these very strange places. So, as I looked at her and this strange sort of collision of science and art, I just started to ask all these questions, like, as if she was a bit of a sentient being. And, sort of asking like how does it feel to have been perceived in that sort of way for hundreds of years and to be ogled and touched and not at your bidding? And, I just sort of took it to that place. And as other women walked in the room, I sort of stood back and looked at their reactions too. And they were often very similar. Yeah, so that's where I had the idea from. And in 25 years as a published novelist, I have probably only twice had an idea, drop out of the sky fully formed, and that was one of those times. And so when that happens, you know it's happening. So I went away that night and started researching the anatomical Venuses. They're sometimes called slashed beauties or dissected graces. Hmm.
Yeah, I think, it lends itself very well to a dark historical fantasy or historical horror. But a lot of it is also, it's not just about even that. It's about, you have these women, and so Eleanor is sort of the one you're dropped to meet first, and she's just been like thrown over by this guy she was in love with who,
Yeah.
she ran away with him, he got what he wanted, and now she's out there and she meets this woman who seems like she just sort of has everything. She has power over her own body. She is a sex worker,
Mm.
but she sort of sells herself as somebody who everything is her choice. She's going to start this, Sorrel, is it?
So, Sere.
Saray, where, it's going to be this very classy place, and Eleanor can join, and, she's already been tossed out on the street, so, now
Mm.
she can make the best of it. She meets a woman, Emily, there, who has already been taken in by Elizabeth. And you just kind of start to get little senses that Elizabeth is not as generous, or rather, she's generous as long as it suits her.
Yes.
But you don't kind of get like the full sense of who she is, right away. You just kind of get this real menacing. However, the story begins with you finding this antiques dealer is looking for the wax sculpture of Elizabeth, and
Hmm.
you know that the wax sculpture of Elizabeth has some sinister power. So it's not like completely out of, out of your mind that there's something wrong with Elizabeth the woman, in the
Yeah.
sense that how she moves about the world. But
Mm.
it was very interesting to just kind of see, number one, Alice is the woman who is the antiques dealer,
Yes.
have this sense that Elizabeth, there's something about she needs to be destroyed. She has this power over men.
Hmm.
Um, and then Elizabeth, the woman who seems to be telling these other two young women that she has the key to their freedom
Yeah.
by selling their bodies and then kind of finding out who she actually
Yeah.
is.
I love Elizabeth. She's such a piece of work. It's always fun to write the antagonist. Um, and I think that's something that I have learned the longer I've become a novelist, the more I've enjoyed writing the antagonists because you start to realize that they uh I think when you're a beginner writer, you think, oh, they're bad, I just have to write this bad person. But the antagonist is never just a bad person. They are actually see themselves as the protagonist of their own story, you know? So, and you can see things from Elizabeth's point of view. She is such a piece of work, but she is just a survivor. She's just trying to survive in this world. She has an absolutely tragic backstory. Um, Absolutely brutal. And that's what she's had to do to survive. Um, and she does tell the women right at the end of the story that, you didn't have it in you. You didn't even have it in you to survive. So you didn't deserve to. So, I did love writing her a lot, because she's very complicated, Elizabeth. But yeah,
She
the antagonist is
is.
always fun to write.
She is. And it's interesting because, uh, on in one hand, I mean, with as one knows with what happened with like with Jack the Ripper and just I mean that's a
Mm,
famous case, but violence against sex workers is like just, and it's not just that's kind. I feel like you have a moment where Elise is talking about, I think it was her who was talking about the Jack the Ripper tours and
yes.
romanticizing this, and I think it was the time
Yes.
period, but in general it's there, there really is nothing. And I say this because I went on a Jack the Ripper tour when I went to
Yeah.
London, and it's a big attraction, but when you
Yeah.
do think about it, it is really,
It's horrifying, isn't it?
it is
Yeah.
horrifying. And
You
it
can
does,
actually do
yeah.
feminist ones now. You can go and do feminist Jack the Ripper tours where they'll
Interesting.
talk more about the women and their history. Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, it is sort of like plugging into that. But I think it was interesting because you do see why she was seductive to the two women she took in
Yeah.
also.
She had
Um,
all the answers, seemingly. Seemingly.
Seemingly, and had, but at the same time, yes, she was a survivor, but she also sort of wrote her own demise
Demise.
in a
Yeah.
way too. And I don't
Yes.
want to give it, I don't want to give too much away because that's not really what it's about. But there was an internalized misogyny there. Yes, she was a survivor, and if other women were able to aid in that survival, if Eleanor
Mm.
and Emily were able to provide what would need to make this established soiree, and people would be paying tons of money for their maidenhead, which is a whole other thing altogether.
Yeah.
It could have worked to a
It could have
degree,
worked. Yes.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. She said, I think in her heart, Elizabeth really does want what she says she wants, which is to have this place of family and fairness for these women. But, she can't give herself over. She can't do that. She's too long been this person who will have to do anything to survive, and she will throw other women under the bus to do it. And of course, there's all these other women in the book that will do exactly the same thing. They're all wanting their slice of revenge, and they're all willing to. It's only Eleanor and Emily that are not willing to do that because they love each other. But all the other women in the book will throw everybody under the bus to get their slice of revenge.
yeah, for sure. And there is also the other half of it is, there's a spell. It's not too much of a spoiler because this
It
is
does, yeah, right
a
up the front. We
story
do know, yeah.
about the wax people as well. And so it's not too much of a spoiler to say that these women do not remain human for the entire story. Um, the magic behind it was super fun. It was good that you didn't give too much. Like you didn't spend a lot
Yeah.
of time in a magic system, but it felt very grounded. How did you
Yeah.
sort of come up with how it was going to work?
I did I didn't want to write a book about witchcraft. I went in and I have I have had a few people complain that there's not enough delving into the magic, but I really didn't want to write a book about magic. Alice is a very unreliable narrator, and I wanted her to not be thinking about the past too much, and she doesn't want to know the details of that magic because of her tragic past, not giving away too many spoilers. But I knew that I wanted it to have happened, but I didn't want to delve into the whys and the hows. I just wanted that to be the reality moving forward, that this is how things were. Um, but we weren't going to delve too hard into the witches' side of the story. Yeah.
There,
So I just tried to keep it grounded and let
yeah.
everybody know what was going on.
It was intriguing, and I would have read a separate story all about them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But no,
yeah,
I
no.
just knew that I didn't want it to be. There's a lot of books about witchcraft out at the moment, actually.
Yeah,
It's does seem to be quite a trend. And while I really enjoy them, for me, I wanted it to be Alice's story,
yeah.
essentially, and that she, because of her complicated past, she is very anti-witchcraft in many ways.
And but
Yeah.
not to the point that she will not work with witches
Oh, she's going to have to do that. Yeah.
to destroy, the evil
Yes.
that is still in the
Yes.
world.
Yeah. Yeah. It is difficult to talk about, isn't it, without giving away too many spoilers.
Right, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Uh,
And people haven't guessed the twist yet, which is heartening. So, yeah, I really haven't had anyone come to me yet and say, I knew what the twist was going to be. Yeah, which is great.
so did you, while you were researching this, did you discover anything surprising?
Oh, I discovered so many surprising things while I was researching. This did take a long time to come together, actually, because while I had the idea that I wanted to write about the anatomical Venuses. Um, and that's great. These anatomical models are fascinating, but they are not a story, right? Um, but somebody placing pearls around their neck, that's a story. That's a story. So I knew that I had a story there somewhere, but then I had to go and find some characters to sort of put in this story. And that came out of some other research as well, actually. So I sort of stumbled upon Harris's list of Covent Garden ladies, which so bizarre as well. So
I
they,
know. I had to look that up too. I'm like, wait, what?
oh, the research rabbit holes I go down. So Harris's list of Covent Garden ladies was this sort of pamphlets that were published in like from about the 1760s in London. And they are basically like these little compendiums of women you could actually go and visit in the Covent Garden area. So they're sex workers. You can actually go and read them. There's several for free on Project Gutenberg. They were basically a list of women that you could go and visit. And you do need to take it with a grain of salt. But I think for the most part, probably they're pretty much real, because people are lazy. They're not going to go and write whole tomes of, made up women that you that you could go and visit in Covent Garden. But it's got their names and it's got, their descriptions of them. And some of these descriptions are very, kind, and some of them are brutal. Some of them call them, she has the manner of a goat, and like it's just absolutely really brittle stuff. But I started reading these. I heard about them. I started reading them. Like the TV show, the TV series Harlots is sort of, based on this. The inspiration is there behind that. So I started reading these, and I just, this sort of cast of characters just was dropped into my lap. Um, so I went down that research rabbit hole, and that is included a lot in the book. Yeah, so there's always these little fascinating bits that you're finding throughout history, and somehow you manage to cobble them together to make a novel. Mm.
So this is intriguing. It is super dark, just letting people know, but it is very good. It was a very good read. What have you got planned for the future? More darkness, or are you going to make it light?
No, well, actually, I do. I have handed the second book in my contract in, so that should be out next year. It's called All Her Beautiful Deaths. And it sort of shifts, it's a dual narrative as well, shifts between 1865 and present day London. And it's about Hadley, who's a young installation artist. She's bequeathed a mysterious album of stunning Victorian death photographs of young women. But when she goes to use it in an installation, the handsome head of a philanthropic trust turns up on her doorstep, and he's going to seemingly stop at nothing to prevent her from finding out how the women in the album actually died. So also a bit mysterious. You'll be happy to know that this is a far more joyful book. Everybody has a happy ending. And everybody's in love with everybody else. I think it is kind of like the book that I needed to write after Slash Beauties, because in looking back, I was so cruel to all my poor characters.
I think, but that's another sort of bizarre, I mean, to us at least, now a bizarre
Mm.
thing.
Victorian death photography can
Yes, I
be
mean, back
very strange.
then it was very, prominent, and I suppose it gave possibly comfort to the families,
Yeah.
much like the mourning jewelry, which
Yes.
I think
I
you
mean, it's
touch on in
hard for
this one.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for us to understand, isn't it, when we can take 50 photos of our lunch that we're having out today. But for people to not have a photograph of a loved one and then they die unexpectedly, that's all they've got left. Yeah. But yeah, like the morning jewelry is also amazing as well. Like all the hair, and that's included in this as well, is the hair work and, pieces of art made out of hair, things like that. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, thank you so much. Check out Slash Beauties. And I look forward to this next one. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica.
All right. So this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest was A. Rushby, or Allison Rushby, and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.